Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 18 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. I'm Blue Jay with JNT250. As always, Worlds well underway now. If it didn't feel like they were underway last week after play-ins, well, things have definitely changed. Damn, things go by really fast. It almost feels like Worlds is over, sadly, for some of the teams. NA not off to the greatest start. I promise you we will dive into talking about North America throughout this episode. We're basically just going to go over what we've seen so far, maybe a little bit of preview as to what we can come to expect of these teams throughout the rest of groups. JNT, any quick thoughts? Anything you want to get off your chest before we get into pick'ems and before I can embarrass myself with my pick'ems?
Yeah, I don't know. Worlds is pretty good. It's obviously sucks that they're so late at night being in the middle of the night. So we end up like, it's either you end up like staying up all night to either watch them and go to bed super early and have like minimal sleep to wake up the next morning, or you just like take the L and feel like garbage, which I've been doing because I'm staying up and watching all the
Yep.
games.
Yeah, I'm basically on that side of things too. I'm struggling to stay awake, but we persevere, we persist on. It's really not that hard. We can get through it. Oh, because the games are freaking good, by the way. Like, yeah, NA's not doing great, but World is actually so fun to watch, man. It's so good once like so I do like seeing new teams at Worlds every year, but it's also really exciting to see teams come back over and over again. Specifically G2. I love watching this team. They're so fucking fun to watch, man. I still think they're overrated. I've said that for a few episodes now, but damn, they are fun to watch. And so even if NA is not doing well, I am just so happy to be seeing some awesome games. So I mean, silver lining, but pretty damn good.
Yeah, well, we'll display our pick'ems real quick. Pick'em's always like a staple of Worlds. Everyone always, whenever Pick'ems comes out, you always like post your Pick'ems in a bunch of different Discord servers, and all your friends are asking like, "Oh, what are your Pick'ems like?" So here are our Pick'ems, just to give it to the people. For the audio only people, we'll list them out. For myself, for JNT, in Group A, I had G2 1, Suning 2, TL 3, Machi 4. Pretty much, it's played out pretty similar. Obviously, with Team Liquid beating G2, makes the group much more interesting. My group B, I had Dam1 first, JDG second, PSG Town third, and Rogue fourth. Obviously, PSG Town's 0-3 in that group. Onto Group C, I had Genji first, Fnatic second, TSM third, and LGD fourth. I think this group is definitely the most interesting group. We'll dive into it later, but TSM always seems to be in that group where there's a bunch of teams tied at 2-1, and unfortunately for them this time, they're the 0-3 team, so
Yep.
it doesn't look like they're going to be having a good time in week two. And lastly, in Group D, I had DRX first, Top Esports 2, UOL 3, and FlyQuest 4.
Yeah, really interesting that you went DRX one. Not that I think that's impossible, just really interesting that you put them over I would say the tournament favorite in top esports. Regardless, though, for me, I had Suning number one in Group A, then G2, then TL, then Machi. I still think that Suning is the best team in this group. We'll get into that in a little bit, though. Uh, Group B going as planned, I think. Damwon 1, I got JDG 2, Rogue 3, PSG 4, and then Group C, I got Genji 1. I have on screen, so people that are seeing this on screen, I have Fnatic 2. That was actually a mistake. I don't know why I submitted it like that. So LGD and Fnatic are actually supposed to be swapped on my pick'ems. I don't know how I submitted it that way. Not that it really makes a big deal. It still makes me look like an idiot for putting TSM ahead of anyone. But nonetheless, Genji 1, Fnatic, or pardon me, LGD 2, TSM 3, and Fnatic 4. And then in Group D, I have Top Esports, then FlyQuest 2. No, I'm not delusional. I don't think FlyQuest is better than DRX. This is just purely some NA optimism coming out. DRX 3, and then Unicorns 4. Um, the reason why I actually put DRX 3 was not even off of like my own um, it's not even from what I've seen out of DRX. From the games I've watched, like pre Worlds, I actually thought DRX looked really good. But there was so many personalities, mainly LS. Was the one that convinced me that DRX had the most volatility and that there's just some days where they just don't show up. And so I thought, well, sure.
If
If
you're going
there's
to
a
throw
group that
one NA team a bone, I guess it's this one kind of thing.
yeah, like I honestly like it's kind of through TSM a bone too, putting them three. But that's kind of hindsighty to say that, right? Because even before we did our pickums, we did say that we thought Group C could go anyway, as long as Genji was at the top. But Um, yeah. Anyways, those are my pickums. I don't think they're anything special. They're nothing too exciting. Uh, for the most part, regardless of what our pickums are, I think we get a little bit optimistic in our pickums from time to time. But from what we actually expect from these groups, I think things are going mostly to plan. Right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, the only one where I guess it's not super according to plan is Group C, because I think people were expecting, you know, the group to be a little more linear. I don't think like in this group specifically, I don't think people were expecting a bunch of 2-1 teams tied for first, or even a team being 0-3. Like for a team to be 0-3, like at the tournament, I did not think it would come out of Group C.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, and so I do agree with you that it's kind of not going according to plan, but part of the Group C plan was that there was no plan, if that makes any sense whatsoever,
Yeah.
because it was such a big question mark, and there was so many different things that could happen. But anyways, I think we should get into the groups now. We'll start going. We'll go A, B, C, D. We'll go through the groups and just give our general thoughts. Where do you want to start with Group A?
Um, I think we can start. Let's start at the top first, because I think it's not as interesting as it is at the bottom, for me at least.
Okay, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think the first match we saw out of Group A was the G2 versus Suning game, and
Hmm.
probably I think most people would agree that was the most entertaining game so far at Worlds. Best game, I guess. I don't know if you want to call it best game, but definitely the most entertaining game. Ton of back and forths in that game. Suning pulling up with an Ocean Drake at like 30 minutes into the game, to which G2 ends up winning a fight right before the Elder Drake spawns. G2's running into the base. They get wiped. Suning runs down to the enemy base. They get wiped. And then the game ends in classic G2 fashion with there being a TP onto the Nexus while the whole enemy team is either in the base or dying in the base. It seems that G2 always just wins games in crazy, like, screaming like fashion. Like the casting is always hype whenever you're going to be watching a G2 game, especially when the game looks like that.
Super true, man. I loved watching this game. It was actually so crazy. And to your point about like it was winning in G2 fashion, absolutely. I tweeted out something along the lines of like G2 will find a way to throw leads when they're winning, but like if they're losing, they'll always find their fight. And that's exactly what happened in this game. They won that game against an Ocean Soul. Um, and they won it against an Ocean Soul against Suning. Like Suning is a good team. Okay, if they would have beat Machi or Team Liquid with Ocean Soul, I'd be like, yeah, okay. But like, Suning is a really good team, and they managed to somehow find their fight. By somehow is mostly, well, I mean, there was a lot of things that happened, but to me, the thing that stood out was Caps getting the TF ulti towards the Syndra. He gold carded the Syndra, and she just got popped immediately right at Elder Dragon. And now you've got the 4v5. They won the fight, they got the dragon, and they were able to push advantage and end off of that. Absolutely crazy. And what a surprise, right? Like, is it really a big surprise when you can always rely on caps? Not really, you know?
Yeah, one of the things that, specifically in this game, but also just kind of as G2 as a whole, like they just don't go down fighting, and that's something that you really have to do, like especially when you're up against an Ocean Drake. Like you cannot attempt to play like a slow and like stally game against an Ocean Soul. Like you have, if you see your window, you pretty much have to take it, because in all other scenarios, like you can't land, you can't poke against an Ocean Soul, you can't do some half-assed engage against an Ocean Soul because they just back up, they heal up their entire HP bars, and then they just go at it again, and you're down summoner spells and alt spells. G2 really just did a great job of picking their fights and fully committing. It's something that I think, really this team, like them being together for so long, they have full trust and they have full like faith in their teammates that, look, we could be in a losing spot. The game might not look so good, but the whole team is willing to commit to these plays. They're willing to go down fighting. I really hate it when teams kind of end up rolling over when, enemy team gets like Baron plus Elder. I mean, I guess Baron plus Elder is usually GG, but if team has a Baron buff and you're down triple inhib, or like in the stages before you go down triple inhib, or if you're down an Ocean Soul, you're down a Mountain Soul, you're down an Infernal Soul. Whenever I see teams just starting to give up their base and they think like, oh, we can maybe like win it out or scale it out, and you're down triple inhib, and all of a sudden your 2k gold lead or gold deficit has gone to a 10k gold deficit. It's really impossible to win those games. But with G2, they're just always willing to fight you. You're never safe. Like Suning, after they got Ocean Soul, pretty much had control of the entirety of the map, and we see G2 finding a fight in their blue side jungle with Caps using the TF ulti. It's just watching G2 is always fun. I think Caps, he really smurfed the entire game with this Twisted Fate. Twisted Fate is one of the most banned champions at the whole tournament, with like 16 bans. And it really went to show, if you put Twisted Fate in the hands of a really good player, plays can happen wherever and whenever.
Yeah. And even though we talk about how G2 looked really good in the late game and they're able to find their fight, this game was still a really big struggle early on, and mostly due to SOFM. Uh, he brought out a little bit of a new style, not a new style as in we've never seen it before, but we haven't seen recently the tank Lee Sin. We've seen a lot more damage Lee Sin. But he was running Spirit Visage, and he was basically, it was almost like he knew that they were going to get Ocean Soul and that he could get the extra healing from Spirit Visage or something. But he was taking every cue. It was like Lee Syndrome was like what
In
you were
full
supposed to
effect.
do in that game, honestly. Like he was taking absolutely every cue, but like it was fine to do it. He was able to set up so many nice kicks, nice plays, nice picks. And honestly, he just looked so good on it. I want to see more of it. I never thought I would say like, "Oh, I can't wait to see Tank Lee Sin some more." But yeah, I want to see some more Tank Lee Sin. I think he looked really good. Um, Suning also looked really good against Team Liquid for a little bit of different reasons, though. More so because they were just ready to stop the Twitch recon that we saw out of Team Liquid. For those that didn't watch this game, if you were a TL fan, it's probably good that you didn't. This game didn't even really start for TL. Like they couldn't get to lane. They were zoned off lane from level one, maybe level two. I think it was level one though. Absolute nightmare trying to run through Draven and Leona just to make it to their tier one turret and get in range of farm. So this is like something that I think we'll see a little bit more of. The level one invades, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But Suning definitely showing how important level one is and punishing the Twitch recon that we saw a lot of in play-in.
Yeah, I really liked, just as you mentioned, Suning's approach in the draft, specifically against Team Liquid. Team Liquid were kind of the first to debut the Twitch ADC and pair it with the Rakan. And, Leona has been a Rakan counter for the last 2 years, and now pairing it with a super aggressive early game focus AD carry and Draven, they were really just able to shut down the lane, as you said, before it even started. And
Yeah,
it really seems that this world specifically, like the laning phase, is the most like normally we like to say like objective control or late game team fighting is super super important, but for the most part, like laning phases are being dominated one way or the other. Like you get a bad top side pick or map ends up getting split and we see top laners going up 30 40 CS constantly and probably a couple games a day. There's probably situations where one top laner is at a massive deficit, or the reverse for the bot lane, where we're seeing tons of 2v2 kills in the early parts of the laning phases, like levels 1 to 4. It's getting bloody early, and it's making for really exciting games. And Suning is doing a really great job. This team could easily be 3-0 and looking like one of the better teams in the tournament.
yeah, and that game specifically, actually, I think is going to completely change the Team Liquid that we see for the rest of this tournament. It definitely did in the next game where we saw Tactical was now on the Callista with the set. Um, they decided, okay, look, we can't lose level one anymore. Level one is way too important. We want to be able to invade with strong picks. They did that. They got an advantage early. I think Kalista got first blood. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but I think Kalista got first blood, and they were off and running. Core JJ looked absolutely amazing on the set, and that was pretty much to me one of the biggest reasons why they were able to take over the game against G2, which was a huge dub for NA. We were pretty short on wins. I mean, we still are, but um, definitely nice to take one over the European rivals there.
Yeah, Core JJ and Jensen had really fantastic games. These two guys, they've been the hard carry for Team Liquid the whole year, and is same story here. Jensen was pretty much hitting 2 to 4 man shockwaves in almost every team fight. Pretty much always one of those targets always being Perks, it seemed. Perks was either dead or zoned out of almost every single team fight that was happening. And Core JJ was just doing a wonderful job in stopping all the Alistar engages. We would constantly see him either, ulti the Alistar mid headbutt pulverize or an Alistar, even cancel the Alistar headbutt with the set E. just a really great game out of Core JJ and Jensen, and definitely, makes the group much
What
more
else is new?
interesting. Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Like what else is new? It's really what you we come to expect now out of TL. If they're winning, it's usually off the back of Core JJ and Jensen. I do want to talk a little bit about Broxa because in the first game against Machi, I want to talk about Machi in the same at the same time here because I think Gemini has been so unbelievably active in the early game with Volibear. This guy is ganking multiple lanes. I think in two out of the three games he had killed two different lane opponents. He ganked twice, got two kills in two games before like 5 or 6 minutes. Like he is so active early, and he's just been a first blood god in these games, really getting his team some advantages before the game's really underway, which is so valuable in this tournament. We've been talking about how important level ones are. He's not doing this during level ones. He is doing this like he's getting his buffs early. He's hitting level three and he's ganking immediately and having so much success on it or
Yeah,
on that volley bear.
Yeah, like going back to what I was saying earlier and just how important the laning phase is, when your jungler is able to influence multiple lanes early on to the game, whether that's, pressuring them off waves, pressuring them off their tower if they're stacking up a wave for a potential dive, they're burning summoner spells, even just creating simple lane pressure is so important in just the meta right now. I'm really liking the Volibear jungle specifically across the entire tournament. It's just a super early aggressive pick that one can scrap any jungler at any point into the game, like pre-level 9. It just it's so easy to just be able to burn enemy flashes by just running into the lane and pressing Q, either flashing, trading jungle flash for mid flash, or just having the laner has to step back into the lane. I'm really liking the more aggressive junglers as opposed to like the farming passive junglers like the Nidalee. I know the Nidalee, it's been really hit or miss for me. We saw Yankos playing the Nidalee against Team Liquid, just to jump back to there really quickly. I don't think Yankos has had a very good group stage so far. I think
No, not at all.
he had terrible games against Suning and Team Liquid, and he's more on the farming, style of junglers with the Nidalee and the Graves, as opposed to the early aggressive junglers like the Lee Sin, like the Volibear, and for me, like those are the junglers that I'm favoring right now.
Yeah, so I do want to keep talking about Yankos, but I just wanted to get back to the point because I said I wanted to talk about Broxa a little bit because he was getting quite a bit of flack for falling behind against Machi. In the game against Machi, it was Broxa's being out jungled and he's got no pressure on any of his lanes, but it's like, look, you should be able to expect your laners to not all die before 5 minutes into the game. Like if the other jungler ganks twice and gets two kills before 5 minutes, to me that's not come on, Brock. So where are you? Like, that's pretty quick to die. So, like, I don't know. I think that to me, that's a lot more credit to Gemini and less like, you know, flame to Broxa specifically. I just think that you got to give credit where it's due instead of just flaming the junglers. Even though I do think that that is like one of Brox's biggest issues is having impact on his lanes. But in that game specifically, I don't think that it was necessarily his fault. Back to your point about Yankos, though, you mentioned how he didn't look good against Suning or TL. I thought he also looked bad against Machi. There was the one game, was he? I think he was playing Nidalee. Okay, so yes, he was playing Nidalee. He sees the Graves gank bot level 2, and instead of invading the enemy blue buff after he sees him bot, he decides to try to contest the bot lane blue buff with no prio in any of his lanes. It made no sense. He goes over there. Naturally, he has to back off because Graves has prio in mid and bot lane. Like, that is so basic jungling that I couldn't wrap my head around. I watched that play a few times trying to figure out what his game plan is there, and I just can't figure it out. There's no pro jungler that ever makes that play, and it's really disappointing to see it out of someone who is such a good jungler in Yankos. Like, this guy's good, but he's not good so far this tournament, and I don't know what's going on with him, but I definitely expect him to turn things around because I'm not seeing the Yankos that we've always seen at Worlds.
Yeah, I remember Yamato talking on the desk after G2 had lost to Team Liquid, and he was just pretty much outlining that, like, yes, while Yankos is, one of the top tier junglers in Europe and has been a top tier, player in the world for the last, 2 years, I guess. This is kind of a completely different style that we're seeing out of him. He's definitely more of a supportive jungler in terms of both his champion pool and his play style. Like Yankos is one to be more helping his lanes, protecting, counter ganking, protecting against dives, using, more of a tank utility style as opposed to a high farm, high tempo, constant invade style of jungling that, he's been doing with the Graves and the Nidalee. And, I wonder if, they're going to keep Jankos on the same style or potentially revert back to, the previous style, maybe put him back on some more comfort champions like Lee Sin, put him on the early game more utility Volibear. I just want to see where, if G2 decides to go this same route with, their drafting in terms of, more eggs into Yankos's basket and less into the perks basket, or if they're going to switch it up moving into week two.
Yeah. So do you have any other thoughts on the teams? I do want to get your thoughts on if your expectations for this group has changed at all. Do you still see the group ending the way you had your pick'ems, or do you have anything that you want to change from that if you could
No,
rather?
I think this group will play out the same. I think I'm expecting, not necessarily large changes from G2, but more changes to how they're approaching the game and, when the game's actually playing, like picking their fights a little smarter and not being so overly aggressive. I think in their first game against Suning, they were definitely a bit overly aggressive. I don't want to take credit away from Suning and SOFM because they had a really great game, but I think, Suning's a little bit more on their map because as you know, like teams aren't scrimming the teams that they're directly in their group with, and I think Suning has pretty much flown under the radar the entirety of Worlds. And, imagine if G2 had lost to them and Suning was a 3-0 team, like you'd be looking at
Yeah.
Suning as a scary, you know, team to potentially go up against the playoffs. But for the most part, I think this group will still play out the same way. I originally did have, TL third. I know they're tied for third right now, but I think they'll beat Machi in the rematch. As Broxa and Jensen mentioned in like interviews, they need to pick up the pace, and that's like that's the community's biggest problem with Team Liquid is they play too slow. And as we're seeing at Worlds, the early game and the laning phase is so important. And if you're down 1-2k gold, it seems to be really hard to get back into the game unless you're making aggressive, proactive plays.
Yeah, so I actually do want to echo that thought too. I think Team Liquid will beat Machi as well in the rematch, but I want to be clear that I don't think that game's free at all. I think there was not really much to expect out of Machi because it was kind of a team we didn't know much about. They're not exactly from a region that people care all that much about, but this is a good team, honestly. I don't think they should be written off in any of their games. I do still have them finishing fourth in the group, but that's not an obvious one to me. So I think they're really good. I have Suning winning still. I think that they have hands down been the best team we've seen in groups. I know they
In
threw against
groups or
G2,
in this
or
this
sorry,
group?
in their group. Sorry, in their
Okay,
group. Yes, yes, that's
just want to
good save
clarify
there
that.
because yeah, yeah. Thank you.
There's another group in
Um,
the next group, which we'll be talking about.
Yes, yes. What was I saying?
You
Okay,
think
yeah, no,
Suning's
I
gonna
think
win?
Suning is, yeah, I think Suning has been the best team in this group so far. Even though they threw against G2, I think that they definitely should have won that game. And I know coulda, woulda, shoulda, blah blah blah. Um, Regardless, to me, it just comes down to what I've been most impressed by, and that to me has been Suning. I think pretty much everyone in that lineup has been impressive. I can't say the same for G2, and those are the two teams that are at the top of the group right now. So to me, it's just like I'm impressed by all the Suning players. I'm really not impressed by all the G2 players, and so that's why I just put Suning ahead. SOFM has been absolutely amazing. One last little thing, I looked at some stats. So any of the notable stats I wanted to share with you guys. SOFM, and keep in mind, everyone, I know a lot of you guys know this, but just to be clear, this is only 3 games. But SOFM has a 38 CSD at 15, plus 38.
Pretty nutty.
That's leading all of groups, obviously, and yes, all of groups, not just Group A. Um, yeah, small sample size, but I mean, I think that's pretty interesting. So I thought I'd let you guys know about that.
Okay, well, I think we're done with Group A. We can move on to the
Hmm.
Group B. Group B kind of feels like it's a race for top two, and that's about it.
Yeah. The thing is, this group's going according to plan. I think for most people, I know you. I think you had PS. Did you have PSG 3?
Yeah, I did. I had PSG
I
3.
think most people had PSG 4 though, but I don't think it's like crazy to see PSG 3. But I think the majority of people, let's say, had PSG finishing fourth, Rogue third, and then JD2, Damwon 1, which is what we're looking at right now. I think Damwon looks absolutely amazing, and so this is what I'm talking about, where I see where when I say everything's going according to plan, this is like almost exactly what you would expect.
Yeah, I don't know. Just I guess we'll start from the bottom here because I think there's less to talk about at the bottom. I definitely thought PSG Talon would come in. Uh, it just feels like their style is so different than when they were playing in the plains. And yes, maybe that's because they have a completely different mid jungle, but it's just a lot more. Oh man, it's just so much more boring. You know, Kongyue and what's the other guy's name? Sorry, Uniboy. They love to scrap early. They put Uniboy on more of the like tank utility style champions. They're running a ton of set mid with a sort of a carry jungler. We saw Kongyue run the Echo a bunch, and it just I don't like the new PSG talent as the old PSG talent. I know this is like their actual roster, but I want the old roster
Yeah.
back.
Dude, and the thing is too, and I heard other analysts say this too, but I need to echo it. It is so true. It's just not fair, man, because you got to see the subs come in and roll all these play-in
Yeah,
teams, and then now you get subbed back in, and you're like, Damwon and JDG are in your group, and like, shit, man, like it actually sucks. And then even the game that like you would think they have a chance of taking a game
oh
against Rogue,
God.
they get hard cheesed. Level 1 and level 3, Rakan is ganking mid. It's like it's just not fair. But I mean, you can't help but compare the difference. Even though you know that it's not a fair comparison, I can't think about how good this team was in play-ins and how not good they look right now. Especially poor Kai Wing. Kai Wing is just like he was so popping off in play-ins, man. That guy had a 47 KDA on Rakan. He was everywhere. Engages were so good. And now it's like he can't find an engage to save his freaking life. Like he's just the plays aren't there, and you just see this team struggling, and I feel so bad for them.
Yeah, I mean, that Rogue PSG Talon game, it pretty much was a perfect game. Like I know that they like the Renekton picked up like one tower bottom lane and then got killed for it like 20 seconds later, but it was pretty much a perfect game. Like you mentioned, I think Rogue in that game they did a really good job in terms of I wouldn't necessarily call it cheesing mid, but it was just good level
It's
one.
cheese. Come on, that's cheese. But
Well,
like, I
it's
think
I wouldn't call it cheese because I feel like cheese would be like if the waves were already crashed and he's hitting minions, but like the wave had just started to meet each other. It was like 125 into the game, so like yes, the bot lane doesn't necessarily have to be bot lane. It was a little cheesy, but I think it was a great job,
yeah.
with the level one. They burned his flash and got a kill. They repeat ganked him like 3 minutes later, brought up a jungler in support, tower dove him level three, and he was just down like a full level already into the game, and it was so hard to come back from that.
So for me, what I think is a little bit different. So to me, it's absolutely cheese. But I think what's different is that whenever we talk about cheese plays level ones, it's always like, yeah, if they did that game again, though, it wouldn't happen that way. But you know what? Level one are meta now. If you're not doing something to make some sort of play level one, if you have the stronger comp, you're trolling. And so to me, like, it's not. Is it even cheese anymore? If like it's expected, it's hard to say. And you could juggle all day long whether it's cheese or not. The point is they got themselves a really good advantage, and it was really smart prep, and honestly they had the game won by like level 3. So
Yeah.
if you can win the game by level 3, you're doing something right, and I think you deserve a lot of credit for that. So even though I do think it's cheese, I think Rogue deserves all the credit for some really good prep.
Yeah, also just want to mention the Rogue versus Stambon game. I think Rogue they were clearly outclassed in every single role individually, but I think they actually did a decent job of, managing to stay in the game and keeping it
They
somewhat
held
competitive.
on.
Yeah, like again, it's
Yeah.
another thing, when I was talking about G2 and how they don't roll over, like Rogue didn't roll over either. Like they were attempting to find fights. They a lot of the game, it felt like they would get the first kill of the fight. They'd blow all their resources into getting that first kill, and then Damwon would pick up another like two or three kills on the back end of it. But I give props to Rogue here. They got drawn into one of the group of deaths, and I think they're doing a good job with what they have. And who knows, like maybe they can pick up a win against JDG and potentially force a tiebreaker. I don't think that will happen, but I'm rooting for Rogue here. If they can win a game, and potentially get a tiebreaker, good on them.
Yeah, no, that game was they were just holding on. They were in the game almost the whole time, and then it was just Ghost had a really nice Ash arrow onto Larson. That's how that one went. And as soon as Larson got picked off, that's kind of where the game just started to fall apart. And I felt bad because I thought Larson looked really good, and his Syndra was really good, and it just didn't really matter once he got picked. They were able to snowball and get objectives and so on and so forth. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm really enjoying watching Rogue. I think that they are the clear underdogs, and it's always fun to cheer for an underdog. But let's talk a little bit about the top dogs here because I think both of these teams are looking really good. Um, I do think that JDG is a little bit undervalued, and I think it's because we're not seeing as much flash. Coming into this tournament, the hype was around Kanavi, right? And I don't remember what champions he's played. No, I do. So he played two Lilia games and then a Silas game. And even though you could pop off on Silas, that's not where the hype comes from this guy. This guy's like a Lee Sin player. He wants to make like some flashy plays. And I think we're not seeing it as much because he's on Lilia, which is a fine pick, by the way, but you lose a little bit of hype when there's not those like pop off plays. And so I think that's why this team is a little bit undervalued. They're still looking really good overall. Uh, Lumau has been great on support. His Pantheon game was amazing. He was absolutely everywhere on the map. His Pantheon was just, it basically snowballed the game. And yeah, I think he was a big reason why they won their game, but against PSG, that is.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure, honestly, where to put JDG within the rest of the tournament because
Yes.
I think it's difficult because Damwon coming in was definitely top two in terms of like the pre-tournament favorites. I would say that most people had Damwon and Top Esports as the pre-tournament favorites, with
Yep.
JDG maybe close
Yep.
behind. And after this first round robin and the first Damwon JDG game, I think that Damwon is by far and away the favorite to win Worlds now after these three games that I've seen from them,
Yeah,
in
so
my
do I.
opinion. I
Yeah.
it's not. I don't think they're like running away with it or anything, but they are the favorite. I'd be really surprised to not see this team in the finals. The only way I think that happens is if Top Esports somehow manages to finish, not somehow, but DRX wins against them in week two. DRX beats them again in tiebreaker, and somehow it's Damwon versus Top Esports in quarterfinals. I would really not like to see another season eight situation, but it's hard to judge JDG because, in my opinion, you have the best team in the tournament as your number one team, and you have
Yep.
two, really weak teams by comparison. You can argue, are Rogue and PSG Talon better than like TSM and LGD, or if they're better than Machi and Team Liquid. Like you could go on and on about what teams you think are better, and
Yeah.
it's going to potentially be a struggle for them if they're not able to, beat Dem One, and they're going to go up against a number one seed, like potentially a Top Esports, potentially a G2, or potentially a Gen G, and it's really hard to rank this team, and I'm really excited actually to see what they look like against Dam One in week two, and subsequently what team they draw into in the quarterfinals, and what that series is going to look like.
Yeah, for me, another standout player from JDG was Yagao, specifically on the Zoe. The
Yeah.
thing is, there's a lot of people that just pop off on Zoe because her Q does so much damage, but this was a game where it felt like he couldn't miss them. The game against Rogue, um, unreal how many times this guy was able to land Qs, and I'm not talking on targets that are sleeping, and not the ones that are bubbled. I'm talking about just targets just roaming around, just randomly just get fucking almost one shot by a Zoe Q. And so many times you don't even need to kill someone just to be able to push them off and have your team take an objective. And that's one thing that Yagao did really, really well. So many objectives were just taken because he was able to poke people out. And oftentimes that's actually what you're looking to do as Zoe. Of course, you want the kills, but if you just poke someone out, you're getting what you want anyways. And I think that that's something that he deserves a little bit of praise for. With that said, when we talk about Damwon, I want to know what player for you is the standout. If we're talking about, if you and I both agree that Damwon is the best team in the tournament right now, who's the guy that who's their guy right now for you?
I mean,
I know
I
who it is for me.
I think, man, it's kind of hard to pick one, but
Yes, it
if
is.
I had to, I'm honestly not going to pick one. Sorry, but
Okay.
it'd be one of either Canyon or Showmaker. I know Nuguri is more of like a
Oh,
flashy
okay.
player, and he has a ton of outplay potential. His team fighting on his cannon was just absolutely nuts. Like
Yeah.
it was just like a throwback to like KT Rolster Smeb in season whatever that was, where he had that fat cannon ulti, similar to that. But I'd go with one of either Canyon or Showmaker. Showmaker was the best player in LCK for summer 2020. Canyon was probably a close second, and I think actually, you know what? I'll choose Canyon. Actually, I'll choose Canyon.
For
I
me,
just
it's
think he's
definitely
really
Nuguri.
nuts. Like Canyon,
Yeah. No. It.
he's like the spark for this whole team. Like once he kicks things off, like then Nuggery and Showmaker just get rolling. But I think for him to start, he's got to start it all off, and I guess that's why I choose him.
Yeah, for me, the whole team's been really good, but I mean that's obvious, right? Like, there's no surprise there. But I had to go Nuggery as far as like my guy because, well, for a couple of reasons. One, last year he was really hyped up and he really dropped the ball. He was maybe he was Dot A award last year. I don't really remember, but I know that he was definitely disappointing. And this year he came in with a lot of hype again, so you were kind of worried about if he would kind of repeat what he did last year, where he couldn't live up to the hype. Definitely not the case. You mentioned his Kennen and team fighting. It was so good. Like, so crazy his patience too, because his team will be fighting a 4v5, and instead of just trying to flank and showing himself, he'll actually stay patient, knowing that his team can survive and forcing the other team to back off. When they have to back off, that's when he decides to go in, specifically around the dragon fight, and he gets like a 5-man cannon ulti. Absolutely insane how hard he's carrying. But not only that, he was really hard pressured. So this was the game against PSG, for those that are wondering. I mentioned earlier how Kaiwing couldn't have that much pressure. In this game, he actually did have a lot of pressure. He
He
was playing the
was
Nautilus.
hard camping top lane.
Yes, he was top a lot. I think he was top twice. I think they dove Nuggery twice.
Yeah,
Despite that,
both top laners were level 5, and Kaiwing is level 2, diving top lane, and then they
yeah.
repeat dive a couple minutes later. Both top laners are level 7, and he's level 3, and they're just diving top lane, 4-man.
Yeah, and then he's still able to 1v1 the Lulu later on. Like, the Kennen versus Lulu matchup is not fun after you're being camped. It's really hard to poke this guy out. He's got shields. He's got so much utility. It's Lulu, right? But it didn't matter. He was still able to 1v1 this guy. He was still really aggressive. And despite being hard camped, he was the one that had the most impact in that game with his Kennen. And so that's why I'm so impressed with this guy. Um, yeah, I think he's the player to watch. But I do want to give a little shout out to Showmaker. Looked up some of his stats. He is leading the whole tournament in KDA right now. Again, sure, only 3 games into the tournament, but he's got a KDA of 29, and that's pretty damn freaking good. So I wanted to highlight him for that as well.
He's a god, straight up.
Tis a god. Anybody else on in this group that you want to highlight?
No, I mean, I think the only thing that's important in this group now is just the JDG versus Dam1 game. I'd be really surprised
Mm-hmm.
to see.
It
I mean, I guess it wouldn't be surprising if PSG Talon took down Rogue, but it would definitely be surprising if either one of Rogue or PSG Talon was able to take a game off of JDG or Dam1. I realistically don't see that happening, and I think we might get a similar situation to like that Fnatic IG group back in season 8, where there was 2 terrible teams and 2 good teams, and who knows, like maybe these are like 2 of the best teams in the world. We'll just have to wait and see till playoffs.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say for both of us that we are expecting Damwon 1 and JDG 2 to get out of this group. I don't think there's anything out of the ordinary there, right? Is that safe to say?
Yep.
Yeah. So, still, and like you said, the rest of this group is just about learning more from Damwon and JDG for when they go into the knockout stage. That's very much what it feels like to me.
hmm
But enough of Group B because we got Group C to talk about. Where do you want to start with Group C?
I don't know.
Pick and choose, JNT. Where do you want to go
Let's
with this one?
um. I mean, I think this is another one where we can start at the bottom because
Okay.
TSM is looking like some hot
Oh,
garbage, like hot garbage. The only
I don't think they're looking that bad. I mean,
the
okay,
only
they are.
the only player on this team that I think looks good is Broken Blade, and it's the rest of the players are looking terrible in my opinion.
I still thought their game against Fnatic, I actually think they should have won that game. I just thought the draft was poor. I shouldn't even say the draft was poor, but I think you are hard trolling by leaving over Evelyn. I think everyone knew a month ago that you should be banning Evelyn against Fnatic. Like, this is not a surprise. And the reason why I need to flame a little bit here is because I gave so much props to TSM for their prep in the playoffs in North America. And then you go and you play against Fnatic and Selfmade, you know he's going to play Evelyn. You know he's going to one shot your team. And that's exactly what happened to them in the loss against Fnatic. So that one I was really disappointed because I gave so much props to this team for their prep. You leave Evelyn up. You play really well against Fnatic. That was the only game that I thought TSM actually looked good. And the game ended because Selfmade flashed over a wall and 100-0 double lift, who was not even in a bad spot. He was in more than a safe spot, but it just didn't matter. You can't really do much about that. And I really felt bad for Doublelift just getting 100-0 in that particular play. And that was what lost them the game. I thought that TSM was actually the better team in most of that game, but yeah, you left open the wrong champion. You paid the price for it, and that was the only chance they had to win. And now they're sitting 0-3.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think TSM is looking good at all. Even in that Fnatic game, I think, yeah, it was a little bit doomed by draft, but I still think that Fnatic was looking like the better team. The main thing, like, they didn't get the fucking memo that, Eve is Selfmade's best champion, and Nemesis is really good on the tier Lucian mid. They didn't watch the EU playoffs, I guess, or something. Like they just didn't. It's crazy to mention because we just were talking about in our previous episodes how that we were really impressed with TSM out of their drafting, out of their level ones, out of their preparations before the games, and it just looked like the complete opposite in these games.
The thing is, though, so I don't want to fault TSM for the mid lane picks there because Bjergsen was shitting on Lucian. I think he was up like 20 CS at 11 minutes. If you're picking Lucian mid, you're picking that so that you win lane, and he was not winning lane. Bjergsen was able to roam top and get a. They dove top lane and got a kill, and he was able to come back to lane and still be up 20 CS. So I mean, that's where I got to give props to Bjergsen there. Just, I mean, we know he can play Syndra, right? But when you're playing against a lane bully like Lucian, you got to give a little bit of extra props because he picked that. He makes that pick so that he can win lane, and definitely he did not win lane. Talking about Nemesis there.
Yeah, although, definitely props to Bjergsen for playing the lane out really well. I think the game was just anywhere but mid lane. Like, mid lane did not matter in that game. It was all about bot and top lane. But yeah, props to Bjergsen for being up CS, but it didn't really matter in the grand scheme of things because Eve was just sitting topside, counter ganking. I just to go back to Broken Blade really quickly. I think he was pretty much the only thing that kept him in that game. I think if he doesn't outplay that 2v1, the game is just instantly
Hmm.
over right there, and the game will end in the next 20 minutes. But like, he got a
Yeah, he
shutdown.
traded 1 for 1 right in
Yeah,
that
and
play.
he
They both
just,
can. Yeah,
yeah, he
that was a
got it.
nice play.
It was a really nice play. But I think if that
Yeah.
play doesn't happen, they lose the game in much quicker fashion. And yeah, I'm not liking what I'm seeing from TSM, both gameplay wise and draft wise.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. The thing is too, even though Bjergsen was like really smashing it in that lane, we saw him pull out another pocket pick against Gen G in the Zillion,
Yikes.
and all of our fears came to fruition there. This is something we've been talking about for a long time. Okay, the narrative was and should be, well, Bjergsen Zillion is really good, but when he goes to Worlds, he's not going to be able to walk out of laning phase even and scale so freely. That's exactly what happened. BDD was playing the set, if I'm not mistaken,
Yep,
right?
he's playing the set
And
mid.
and this one, Bjergsen was down 20 CS, and this wasn't at 11 minutes. This was at 5 minutes. Bjergsen was down 20 CS at 5 minutes into the game. He was getting absolutely wrecked, and I won't be surprised if we don't see Zillion anymore.
Yeah, I think there's like that fear in North America, not I guess fear, but like there's not, you know, teams, they don't have confidence in their ability to pick an aggressive mid laner and know that that mid laner is going to win that match, that early matchup versus Zillion, and smash him in CS. But like going onto the world stage, like these aren't like North American mid laners. Like you could argue in North America
Yeah.
that there are four at maximum good mid laners on any given day. And you could argue on a given day, like maybe it's only two or three. But on the world stage, especially in this group, there are a lot of good mid laners. You have GA, Nemesis, who's having a little bit of a down year, but I think is still a really good
Yeah.
laner. And you have BDD, who I think was like second All Pro LCK. He's been one of the top mid laners in the league, like right behind Chovy, Showmaker, and Faker for the last 3 years. And yeah, Bjergsen's not able to do his normal and against these mids.
He can't do his thing. But
Yeah,
okay, when I say I don't expect to see the Zillion, I do want to emphasize that I wouldn't mind seeing it again. I just don't think you can pick it so freely. A lot of times when you have a pocket pick, like I don't know, what's a classic pocket pick, like Froggen on Anivia, you don't see him play it all the time because it's got to get the right matchup. And I think it's kind of the same thing when it comes to Bjergsen on the
yeah,
Zillion.
like
There,
the
you can't
draft
just
has to
pick it
meet
and be
certain
like, "This is
conditions.
fine." Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's exactly it. And I think that's one thing that they were able to get away with in North America, and you just can't at Worlds, and that's why I say I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see it again. Um, but I like that you brought up BDD. This is a guy that I think is so good. I just really enjoy watching him. He's pretty volatile and kind of crazy. And speaking of volatile, so is Clid. Clid is kind of hit and miss, but I mean he's another player that's really fun to watch. Um, kind of like G2 style, where you don't know what you're going to get out of him, but you know it's going to be fun to watch. That's kind of what I feel like when I'm watching Clid.
Yeah, I wish he was still on SKT or T1.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Let's talk about uh let's talk about the game specifically against Fnatic though, because even though I think Gen G is the best team in this group, and they should be the best team in this group, I didn't think they looked very good against Fnatic though. The level one would just completely wrecked them. Life came to lane with Spellbook without Flash, and this is where I got to give props to the Fnatic bot lane. Um, they were really aggressive with the Leona and was it Senna? Was it
Yep.
Leona Senna?
hmm
What was it? Yeah, they absolutely smashed him, and they hard punished the Rakan that didn't have E level one. So I mean, I gotta throw a little bit of shade towards Life there because I think that's kind of lazy. Like you need to know that Leona can engage on you at any time, especially if you're running to lane without flash. But regardless, it has to be capitalized on, and Fnatic did that, and so I really think props needs to be given to them for that.
Yeah, the thing that I didn't think it was terrible that he ran no flash. However, I thought his summoner spell choice was terrible because like you're not gonna win early lane Senna Leona against Ezreal Rakan. You're simply just not gonna win a 2v2. Yes, maybe you're taking those aggressive summoner spells for your jungler to come down early into the game, and you'll have a massive combat advantage if you have both Ignite and Exhaust. But just like for the early laning phases, like you're not gonna have pressure in that lane. You're not gonna have kill threat in that lane. So why take the aggressive summoners? I would much rather like if you know your Ezreal's going to take TP and not take heal, maybe take heal exhaust or, like cleanse exhaust because you're playing up against Senna Leona, like hella roots, hella stuns. Like, they're going to need a cleanse in that lane. I just didn't understand his summoner spell choice, but I did somewhat understand his choice of not going a flash. I just disagree with the summoner spells that he ended up choosing, and it was a really good job by Fnatic to just recognize that hey, these guys have no heal and this Rakan has no flash, so if Leona can just get on top of the Rakan, he's just dead 100%.
Yeah, and the game kind of felt over after that. Honestly,
Yeah.
Selfmade looked really good. He was. You know what? I think Selfmade. We came into this tournament talking about how he might be the best player on Fnatic. I think he's just proving that more and more as the tournament goes on. He's just so aggressive and like he gets so many advantages, whether it's on Graves or on Evelyn. Regardless, this guy has so much impact on the game, and I think he's the main reason that they're getting their wins. Again, I still want to give props to the bot lane for the game against Gen G, but overall, to me, it's Selfmade's show, and I think that Nemesis has kind of been maybe AFK is a little harsh, but I mean that's kind of what I'm thinking. He felt like it feels like he's not really having that much of an impact on the games where his jungler's absolutely smashing. So I think that Fnatic right now is being kind of carried by Selfmade. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it just seems that the approach in the game, like the way that they're taking it is they're doing a lot of early aggressive picks in their lanes in top lane and bot lane, and they're pretty much just using mid jungle as like a duo roaming for dives in top lane and bot lane. So I don't mind like you saying like Nemesis is like somewhat AFK. It just seems that like their focus is not mid lane. Their focus is everywhere else but mid lane.
Yeah. And I thought Bwipo's looked a little bit better too at Worlds than he did in. Well, I guess he looked okay in playoffs, but leading up to playoffs, Bwipo was not looking like himself, and so he started to look a little bit better in playoffs in the LEC, and now at Worlds, he's starting to look a little bit better. Nothing amazing, like to me, I'm not like wowed or anything, but I think it was definitely if you were a Fnatic fan coming into Worlds, I think that there was a reasonable worry about how Bwipo would perform, and I think he's been okay. So I think that that's something that Fnatic fans can have a sigh of relief for as well.
Yeah, I think just Nemesis has been solid and serviceable. Bwipo's been solid and serviceable, and their bot lane and jungler are just playing super, super well. And you know, in League nowadays, if nobody's inting on your team, it's usually a good thing.
What I will say though, when you say solid and serviceable, I think you need more than that at Worlds, and so I think that if Fnatic is going to have success in this tournament, I think they still do need a little bit more out of their top laner and out of their mid, especially if they get to other groups where the top like we know that there's like really good top laners in some of the other groups too. So if they do make it to the knockout stage, Bwipo is going to have to step up big time, especially right now with top lane being really. It's just important. Let's just be blunt about it. It's just important, and it's not that it never has been important in the past. But this year, it seems like there's so many different picks that are coming out in the top lane, and there's so many different ways of playing in the top lane that it's like you could be exposed if you don't know your shit. And so I think that top lane is just a little bit more important this year than it has been in the past.
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I'm not worried about Blippo at all. I think
Okay.
he often plays up to the level of his opponents. The only really top laners that he's ever been like completely destroyed by are just like Deshai and Wonder. Other than that, and I mean, those are like two really good top laners. So other than that, I think he'll be fine. I don't see him struggling up against Broken Blade, Longshing, and Rascal going into like these next week 2 games. But definitely it will be, the pressure will be on him if he has to go up against a guy like Nuguri, like Zoom, like 369. We'll have to see then. But for now, I think he's doing fine.
What are your thoughts on LGD? We kind of knew what to expect out of them, but we also kind of didn't coming into this group because they started off in play-ins really poorly. Everyone was like, okay, maybe Chinese fourth seed is not so great, and then they won 6 in a row. They went back-to-back 3-0s in their BO5s and play-ins, and now in groups they're still looking like a solid team. Give me some of your quick thoughts on LGD.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of got baited by them a little bit. Like they just looked so terrible in the best of one
I know.
format and so good in the
Yeah.
best of three format. Like it's hard to like. It just feels like you wanted to put like in the pick'ems at least. Like I wanted to put this team under TSM just for the fact that they looked so bad in the best of one format, and then they came out looking pretty good. I think they look overall. I think this is a team that would get out of, this team I think would get out of Group A. I think this team is on the level, somewhat on the level of Suning and better than Team Liquid, better than Machi. I think they could, potentially, duke it out in like a group, in like Group B against, JDG. But I don't know, like it'd be weird. Like I feel like in this group specifically, like I would think moving into week 2, I don't have them making out. I'd have them losing to Fnatic and Gen G. Fnatic, getting 2 wins, Gen G getting 2 wins, and LGD only getting 1 win at the minimum. But I don't know. It's hard to judge this team. They're in a bit of a weird group for me to like judge their
Yeah,
level of skill, if you know what I mean.
yes, I do, and I still have them getting out. I still have it as Gen G one and then LGD two. I think that GA on the Echo looks really good. I hope that he gets to play more of that. We don't see a lot of mid laners playing the Echo. It's not like it's a crazy new pick, but it is something that we don't see a lot of, and he has a lot of impact on it, especially in team fights. I thought that Kramer also looked good in team fights as well on the Misfortune, specifically talking about the game versus Fnatic. That was
Hmm.
one where team fight, like it was a really close game and it came down to team fights. And GA on the Echo and Kramer on the Misfortune were just so much more impactful than Nemesis on the Syndra, which is one of the reasons why I felt Nemesis seemed a little bit AFK. That was one of the games that made me feel like it. He had so much farm and he didn't really do much with the Syndra. Like Syndra's a pick that you can just one shot someone or pick someone off, and it never really felt like he had much pressure on anyone like that. And so that game specifically was one of the reasons why I thought Nemesis was a little bit lacking. Um, in the TSM versus LGD game, that was where I thought LGD looked really sloppy. I mean, so did TSM. That was
Hmm.
where he had Bjergsen overextend top to try to kill Lang Xing under tower, and then he got deleted after
Yeah.
that. Double lift, blue flash level one against the Nautilus. Yeah, and then but then at the same time, uh, you had LGD starting up the dragon with no TSM members showing, or one TSM member showing, pardon me. So they had 3 missing and then the Shen ultimate available. You have 2 LGD players trying to start drag. Naturally, they just got caught and hard engaged on by TSM. I thought that was really a lazy play. And I was like, this is so LGD to look so good in some games and then so bad in others. Or even by play by play, you can look so good in one play and then so bad the next play. And I think that I've just accepted that this is the LGD we're going to see for the rest of the tournament. It's impossible to predict how they're going to look at each and every play, and I've accepted that. But at least they're fun. They're kind of like G2, where they're really fun to watch. You don't know what the hell you're going to see, but you know that you're going to enjoy it.
Yeah.
So that's really good. Yeah, I still got them making it out though. I have faith in Peanut. He's been enjoying the Kindred a little bit, and I think he's looked pretty good on it. So um, until someone smashes Peanut's Kindred, I have faith in this team making it out of groups.
Yeah, I think this is definitely the most interesting group that we have. The classic, three teams tied for first place with a 2-run record. The little triangle of, Fnatic beating Gen G, Gen G
Yeah.
beating LGD, and LGD beating Fnatic. And that always makes for an exciting second half to the group. Usually kind of ends up in some tiebreakers. Tiebreakers are always fun at Worlds. High pressure games, best of one format. Always makes for some good extra games. And I don't know, this group is just a mystery. I think it'll be super hard to predict. I don't think people thought that LGD would be sitting with 2 wins. I don't think people thought that TSM would be sitting 0-3. And Gen G and
I think some
Fnatic,
people may have.
some people,
Some
but
people might
yeah,
have.
maybe. But I guess I'll rephrase and say as bad of an 0-3 as they are, because they look pretty
Yeah.
fucking bad.
Yeah.
And you know, Fnatic taking down Gen G was probably a bit of surprise to most people, and it's gonna be exciting.
I think there's also still a lot of people that haven't given up on TSM, and I'm totally
Ah,
cool with that because
ah,
you can. So
I
hold
gave
on,
up.
because I'm cool with that
When
because
they
you
died
can
level
always
one,
have a
I gave
bounce
up.
back. Let me finish. You can always have a bounce back week two, uh, but to your skepticism, I think it's totally warranted because look, you're trying to catch up to three teams. You have 3 games left, and you're 2 wins behind 3 other teams. So it's like you're basically cheering for both teams to lose in all the other matchups that aren't your own. But that's just impossible to happen. You
Yeah,
can't have both teams lose, and so it just feels so doomed. It feels like no matter what happens in the games that aren't TSMs, it's bad for them. It's kind of like they shot themselves in the foot so hard that it's also almost impossible. And I do think that we are seeing the decline of Doublelift. We've seen that throughout the year. We've seen some little shining light of Doublelift having some good performances, but this year as a whole, Doublelift has just been worse than we've seen him the last few years. And
yeah,
I hope that it's not a sign of what's to come, but we're definitely seeing a decline in Doublelift. And well, I mean, that's just what happens sometimes in League of Legends, right?
yeah. I mean, for me personally, I think for the majority of the year, minus the whole support debacle that they had in the middle of the season, I think Doublelift was the worst performing player on TSM for almost the entirety of
Yeah.
playoffs. I know he had a couple of good games against Team Liquid, and they're
He had the one
uh,
good series. Yeah, the Team
yeah.
Liquid series, he was
Uh,
actually great.
he had 3 good
Yeah.
games within that series, but other than that, in my opinion, he's been the worst player on TSM, and I'm pretty sure someone can correct me if I'm wrong, either in the live chat or like on the YouTube comments, but only one team has ever come back from being 0-3 in a group and ended up making out, and that was Fnatic in 2017. And that was like miracle of all miracles. Had to play double
Yeah.
tiebreaker, needed like Longzhu to 3-0 again, and needed so many things to fall into the right place for them to make it out of the groups. And then they had to win 2 tiebreaker matches. And let's be honest here. TSM in tiebreaker matches, that ain't a good pairing. So I don't see it happening.
Yeah.
I think this
Yeah.
team is pretty easy 0-6. The only team I actually see them beating would potentially be Fnatic, and Fnatic just does some like random troll ass shit and someone runs it down. But I don't see them beating LGD. I don't see them beating Gen G, and the only team I think they can beat is Fnatic, and I still don't see that happening.
Yeah, their chances of getting out of this group are down to somewhere around 1%, I would say. It's looking really grim and really unlikely, but I
If it
think we've
happens, you can flame me, but it's not happening.
yeah, yeah, I mean, hey, sure, right? I can't disagree with that. Let's move on though. We've talked plenty about Group C. Let's move on to Group D. Where do you want to start with Group D? You want to start at the top or start at the bottom?
Let me just pull it up here. I think we can let's go from top down, no pun intended.
Nice.
It's a little snuck one in there, you see?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So top esports starting off 3-0. This was what most people expected. DRX not looking bad either though. Like they're playing at a level that like if they were 3-0, you wouldn't be surprised either. And then it just seems kind of obvious that these are the two teams that are getting out. You got FlyQuest who's not looking good. They struggled to get the one win that they did have, and then Unicorns of Love is 0-3. Yeah, this is just another group that things are going as expected, and there's so much talk about How every year there's something wacky that happens in the groups, and maybe it still could happen in week two, but I'm just not seeing it. Not in this group anyway.
Yeah, this group is a little similar to Group B, but it's much closer. Like in Group B, the gap between Damwon and JDG I think is decently big, and the gap between Rogue and PSG Talon is pretty big. Whereas you go to Group D, the gap between Top Esports and DRX is pretty close, and the gap between FlyQuest and Unicorns of Love is also pretty close. I thought Top Esports, they had a close game against DRX. Doran whipped out the Quinn top lane counter pick into Renekton. Pioshik had a really insane Lee Sin game. His early game was really fantastic, I thought. And I think, this is sort of the group. And I guess it's not the group to watch because Group C is a group to watch, but this is, but the match between Top Esports and DRX, the week two matchup, that's the matchup that I'm really, really intrigued about.
Yeah, I think the shining star for me in this group is 369. I mean, you could say it about a lot of different people. You could say Jackie Love. You could say Knight. Honestly, you could say a lot of different players. Just DRX had some great performances as well. For me, though, it's been the top laner 369. I really like seeing this guy play Jax. I don't know about you, but his Jax is so fun to watch and really good. And it even feels like even if things don't start off well, he somehow manages to turn things around and 1v9 the game on Jax.
Yeah, everyone knew that 369 was a good player coming into the tournament. It was just a matter of will he perform on the world stage, similar to Knight, when like will these guys perform when they finally get to the world stage, and
Yeah.
they have, and it's good to see. It's good we didn't see like a Nuguri 2.0 kind of thing.
Yeah, he even got counterpicked in the one game too, 369, where he took the Renekton and then we saw Quinn come out and you're like, oh shit. That's never fun, eh? When you take that blind pick and then you get hard counter, that's not a good time. Um he was still able to after you are losing, because it's inevitable that you lose that lane. But after you lose that lane, like he was able to get some nice freezes off and actually freeze the lane in order for him to catch up in farm and still have an impact on the game. So that to me was where he shined really well. That was against DRX, if I'm not mistaken, and I think that was also the same game that we saw Knight whip out Nocturne, right?
Yeah, hold on. I just want to flip back to that just really quickly, just to get my two
Yeah, go
cents in
for
there.
it.
I thought 369 did a really great job of sort of saving that lane. Like that
Hmm.
lane got up to a pretty rough start for him. He got down. Well, he didn't really like, get down in CS. He managed to keep it pretty close for the most part. He had a really good pivot with his build, going into. I think he did Black Cleaver into, was it Aranduin's? He went from Black Cleaver into a tank item into like another tank item. He built Locket third item on Renekton, which was really really good. I remember LS and Atlas were saying how they liked that, and I thought he
LS
did.
loves Locket.
Yeah, yeah. I think that 369 did a great job of pretty much saving that lane because, in the LCK, there was a ton of Quinn counterpick into Renekton. Like, it's a pretty common thing up there. We really don't ever see that in NA. I think I've seen it once or twice in EU, specifically Wonder did that into, I don't remember who, but I know Wonder did play Quinn into Renekton one time. But he did such a good job of saving that lane, and I think that was where, like, Top Esports, like, didn't lose the game. They obviously won the game on their own merits, but I think that the game could have been lost for that lane. And 369 did
Hmm.
a good job of, you know, stabilizing and getting back into the game.
Yeah, he had that really nice 1v2 outplay versus Unicorns of Love on the Jax, where he was ganked by the Lee Sin and the Camille, and you'd think like, oh, is he gonna get out of this? Is he gonna get out of this? Oh, he's going back. Oh, he's winning. Okay, and like that was just one of those plays. He almost actually picked up the double kill as well. Another player I want to highlight though, Jackie Love. I mean, big
He's
surprise. We know
such a
Jackie Love is really
beast.
good. Yeah, they were talking on cast about like maybe he is the world's best Senna.
Yes.
Probably, yeah. I
His
mean,
Senna,
I can't say anything to say against that. His Senna's really good, like
he
really,
he
really good.
he plays the range of the Senna so well. He's like frontlining on Senna in like late game
Yeah,
team fights. Like he knows his ranges so well. Like I don't know. It's just really nice to see. Like most of the times we're seeing Senna start off at the back of team fights, throwing out W's, throwing out Q's through his teammates to like help start out the poke in a team fight. But Jackie Love is just up there, standing either with the tanks or in front of the tanks, and just playing really really well. His Senna in comparison to every other Senna that I've seen at the tournament is not even close. It's nuts.
yeah. Well, and he also just another little stat here. He's actually leading in worlds for damage per minute. at 751 DPM. Again, 3 games, but yeah, that's really, really freaking good. And he's dishing out the damage on the Senna. So really good to see him absolutely popping off. And you can't give credit to this team without giving credit to Karsa. He's just a guy that's always in the right spot. I thought his Gragas looked really, really good too, and he was able to set up a lot of plays. And so this is just like this is what you expect out of the world favorite coming into the tournament. And so far, they are looking like a favorite. You and I mentioned how we think Damwon is the best looking team so far. I think that's true, but I think Top is not too far behind, and I think that you see that in their gameplay.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think Karsa. I don't want to like get too far ahead of myself here, but like he's definitely up there in like when you think of like all-time great league players, like I think Karsa's got to definitely be up there. He's been a top player in the world. Pretty much has been first, like he's been on a first seed team on pretty much all every team that he's been on. He was on Flash Wolves for so many years, made the move to China, was on RNG, a top team for 2 years. Now he's on Top Esports, who's a top team and arguably should have made Worlds last year. Yeah, he's I think in my opinion he's up there in like greatest league players. Like maybe he's not at the top of the top, but he's up there for sure.
Well, and you have to wonder if he would be at the top of the top if he wasn't playing for the LMS for so
I mean
many years. And
maybe.
it's not that the LMS is like a dog league or anything like that, but it's definitely not as respected as China or Korea or Europe. Like now that you're playing in a major region and you're able to come out as the number one seed, and obviously you're looking really good and carrying your team while doing it, it's really good to see for him. And I think that is kind of what pushes him towards the all-time great conversation. I don't know if I'd put him there yet, but I think he's on his way, and so he's looked really good. So hats off to him, let's say.
Hmm. So I guess we should move on to DRX now. Like I mentioned before, I don't think DRX is actually that far off of top esports. They had a pretty competitive game against them, and they were smashing the Unicorns of Love and FlyQuest. I was really liking. I forget against who it was, but it was Pioshik playing the Nidalee and Keria playing the Pantheon, and they were just like running show.
That was against UOL, I believe. I
That
think
game, that
that
was
he was
such a fun
playing.
game to watch. Like Keria got like he started off the game like 4-0-2, and he's like cross mapping with the Nidalee and with Pantheon. I remember at one point in the game, like the only kills that DRX had in the game were on the Nidalee and on the Pantheon. Like Nidalee had 7 kills and the Pantheon had like
Yes,
six
yes,
kills, and it was like
yeah.
I was like, dude, like solo lane, like the carries, quote unquote, the top mid and ADC are just like assists only.
Yeah, Caria was all over the map again. I mean, that's what you expect out of a Pantheon, right? That's what's supposed to happen, but
Hmm.
um, it is still nice to see it work so well and for them to absolutely roll over the game. I think Piosik finished that game 13-1-6,
Yeah,
is
or
what I
something
got
like
here in
that.
my notes. So he was absolutely destroying. The bot lane wasn't any different either. At 6 minutes into the game, Def was up 49-28 in CS. Yeah, that's just at 6 minutes into the game. That was as Ash Pantheon versus the Jin Alistair. Um, and it just felt like they were winning everywhere on the map in that one. And I feel bad for UOL because it's like they're coming from a region that's always just missed out on making it to the group
And
stage
then they draw
every
this
year.
group.
They finally make it and they're just getting clapped. They're even losing to FlyQuest, and FlyQuest is not looking very good right now either.
Hmm. Yeah, I think Defton, or no, sorry, not Deft. Keria and Pioshik, they were like definitely the question marks, like with this new like rebuilt DRX roster when they kind of absorbed like Griffin. They got like the Griffin head coach. They got what's his name, Doran, and they also got Chovy. They brought in Pioshik and Keria, two pretty much just rookies, and they're looking like some of the best players on the team, top players in the LCK. I think they both made, or Keria made second team All Pro in both spring and summer, and I believe Pioshik made third team in one of the seasons. But they're both looking really, really good. I love the style that I'm seeing out of DRX with like a heavy, heavy focus on jungle, just with Pioshik. He looked fantastic in all three of his games. One Lee Sin, one Kindred, and another, and then Italy game we were just talking about. Really, really good. This is like I said, the matchup between Top and DRX is going to be super interesting, and I think we have a bit of a Invictus Gaming Fnatic situation from season 8.
Yeah, so I like how you mentioned how like the question marks were around Piosic and Caria. Coming into the tournament, all the LCK analysts were all saying the same thing. They were saying like, "Oh, I don't know how Piosic is gonna hold up," and I don't. To me, he was the one that looked the most impressive right off the bat. And
Yeah.
yes, like it's not like we're watching. It's not a huge sample size, and maybe we do see him crumble as the rest of group stage goes on. But so far, so good. He's looking really, really impressive. He did fat finger the Kindredar in the FlyQuest game, which I think
Hmm.
was one of the only reasons why FlyQuest had a chance in that game. I think that game was kind of close because FlyQuest was almost getting Soul. And I think that there was a lot of NA fans that were hopeful, like, hey, we had a pretty good
Hey.
game against DRX. Uh, Not really, though. Like, I didn't think that they looked that great against DRX. Um, I think that there was that window. Okay, he fat fingered the Kindredar. They still tried to go for the Drake anyways, but they just couldn't, and they got destroyed because they didn't have Kindredar. But if he doesn't fat finger his R and accidentally use it too early, I think that DRX just runs away with that game. And uh, yeah, Piosik was all over the map, getting so many different marks on Kindred. And well, there was also Chovy who was just way ahead in lane, and Power of Evil is known for his laning, but he was kind of getting clapped by Chovy, which is like one of the biggest worries for FlyQuest
It's
coming
kind of
into this
Chovy
tournament.
though, so I'll give Power of Evil a
Yes.
pass on that one.
Sure, right, but
Yeah.
that the thing is, that's the worry coming into the tournament is you're going to be up against Knight and Chovy for Power of Evil. That was one of the worries, and it came to light there, and it was like, yeah, crap. This is
I,
kind of what we expected,
yeah, I don't know.
and
I
what's
wouldn't call it a
happening.
worry because I think it was just expected and that's what happened.
Well, you're worried that it's going to happen because
Okay,
it's
sure.
expected to happen.
Okay, you got me there.
Nonetheless, yeah, I don't think that Power of Evil is the problem for FlyQuest. I think everyone will agree with that.
Yeah,
He
you
had
know.
an absolute 1v9 performance on the Syndra to grab the one win against UOL. Even Ignar looked really good on the Rakan. That we've seen so many times. His Rakan is just good, right? Like that's what you're
Yeah.
expecting. If you think of Ignar, you're thinking of Rakan engages.
Hmm.
Um, the problem with this team, and I don't think this is going to come as a shock to anyone, is the top lane. I don't know what the fuck is going on with Solo, but he is running it down, baby.
Man, like
He's
Solo's griefing Worlds games, man.
Yeah, dude. I'm
Dude.
actually so sad to see this, and it's not because I thought Solo was gonna pop off at Worlds, but it's because I know that he's better than what he's showing. Like he is the worst player in the group stage so far for me. I think he has hands down been the worst player, and I don't think that he's that bad of a player. But small sample size of games, and you didn't show up for two of them, you're gonna look really fucking bad. And so I think he's one of the biggest reasons why FlyQuest is struggling right now. Um, on top of that, it's not just him. There are some plays where you could just tell this team doesn't seem to be on the same page. I think was it today's games that we saw Ignar fly in, going in. Lol, he went full Leroy Jenkins on the Pantheon. Was that today? Whenever it
Um,
was, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter when it was. You could just tell that they weren't on the same page. You got FlyQuest members backing out. Ignar is going in, baby, and no one's there to back it up. And they just threw the game off of Second Herald. That meant nothing. Like it was such a bad engage, such bad timing. Clearly, some miscommunication there. And if you're having communication issues at Worlds, you're in big trouble because you've had all year to get your communication on lockdown, and it doesn't seem like FlyQuest has that.
yeah, I think I don't know, like the form that FlyQuest are on right now. I think both of them and the Unicorns of Love would be 0-3 in any group, I think. I
Interesting. I could agree with that. Yeah, I think I could agree with that.
maybe like if FlyQuest was up against PSG Talon or same with UOL, those are like the only two teams I would kind of expect them to pick up wins on. Maybe TSM actually, I guess. So okay, maybe that's not true, but I definitely think that these are two, at least the form that they're showing right now, they're two of the weaker teams in the tournament. PoE as you mentioned, PoE straight up just put the whole team on his back in that Unicorns of Love game. I think if he's not so
Yeah.
insanely far ahead in the game, they probably end up losing that one. Yeah,
Yep.
Solo's just straight running it down on Renekton. I think I don't know what his like final KDA was, but it was like 2-9-6, and like when you're winning the
Yeah.
game, like that's like in a solo queue game, like where you're just running it down, but you're like have better team. It's like team. Oh man, it was just not good from Solo, and
Okay.
he was like
I
he
think
was the player that we were worried about with FlyQuest, and it's
sure.
showing.
The thing is, for me anyways, and I think you might agree with this. I think I was worried about him just for champion pool. I wasn't worried for him to just run it. Like I didn't. I thought that he would be exposed and like, oh, he couldn't play some of these champions. But it's not even that he can't play the champions. It's that he's just absolutely griefing. I don't think it
Yeah.
matters what champion he's playing. He's taking fights that he has no business taking, and that to me isn't a champion thing. That's a just. I don't know, maybe it's a mental block. It could be nerves. And again, you don't like it could be nerves for all the players though, you know? Like you're on the world stage, so anybody could be nervous. So even though I do think that it could play a part, whether it's nerves or not, you got to show up, and he's definitely just not showing up right now.
Yeah, I don't have too much more to say on both FlyQuest and UOL. I'd be very surprised to see either of them pick up a win against DRX or Top. Although just to add that, I think the UOL FlyQuest number 2 game will be kind of exciting.
Here's what I'll say about FlyQuest though is that even though they're not looking good right now, they are not playing to the standard that we know they can play at.
Yeah,
Like I don't think they're better than DRX. There's no way. I don't think they're better than Top Esports. There's no way. But there is a way that this team can play better, and that's all I think that you should want to see if you're an NA fan. I think that you just want to see the teams show up and play to the abilities that they can. And I don't think we're getting that out of TSM. I don't think we're getting that out of FlyQuest. I do think we are getting that out of TL. Even though TL's 1 and 2, like yeah, they're not doing so hot, but I think that they're showing some signs of life and and making some good plays. I don't think we're seeing that out of FlyQuest and TSM. TSM, I think they're done for just because they're 0 and 3, but I don't think FlyQuest is done for because they were able to grab that one win. They
yeah,
do still have a chance of getting out of the group. I think they've looked just as bad as TSM, but they got a win, so they're not out of it, you know?
yeah. It's much easier to even, regardless of what teams are in your group, it's much easier to be able to get out of groups when you at least have that one win, and there's the chance that okay, you take a game off the second seed team and you can force a tiebreaker. Like there's a chance, and we're in best of ones, and anything can happen.
Yeah, I think just to talk a little bit about UOL, well, I think a few people. I don't really remember if everyone else had these same thoughts, but I was a little bit critical of Boss. Um, Not that there's a lot to be excited about for this team, but I thought that he played pretty well. I think that he's their best player. Let's put it that way, which isn't really saying a whole lot if I'm being completely honest. But I think that he played the Orin really well against the Renekton. I think that was that the FlyQuest game?
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that he did pretty well there. But again, like when you have one guy running it down, right? Because that was where Sola was running it down. It's like nothing too much to celebrate about. Um, we saw Gadget pull out a Karthus bot lane, which was exciting. Hooray! New picks. This is fun. And well, it didn't fucking matter. He still got rolled anyways. But yeah, I do feel bad for the Russian region because they
The
finally made it to
CIS.
groups and yeah, and this is
Unlucky.
kind of just what we're seeing. Ananosic looks okay. Santos looks okay. No Man's is just not nearly as impactful as he was in the play-ins, and that's
He's
not
just up
necessarily his
against like
fault.
such a higher
Yeah,
caliber
exactly,
of player.
exactly. We mentioned how like you have Knight and Chovy as the mid laners,
And
and
PoE put you in
PoE
a body bag
is
in
a
that game.
yeah, and PoE is a good mid laner too. Maybe he's not on the level of the other two, but he's a damn good mid laner, and so it almost feels like it's not even fair for No Man's,
Yeah.
just because you can to compare his play from play-ins to what we're seeing now. It's night and day, but that's just to be expected, right?
hmm
Um, as far as FlyQuest's chances of making it out, I don't think it's really changed at all. I guess if I gave him 5 to 10% before, I'd give him anywhere from 3 to 5% now. I think it's still really, really low. I don't see much changing. They need to definitely change the way they're playing if they want to make it out. Turtle has been okay. He's just been there, you know. It's not like he's running it down necessarily, but you're kind of getting what you expect out of Turtle, honestly. And I actually still am waiting a little bit to see a little bit more out of Santorin. I
Yeah, he's
think
been
that
sort of invisible, I think would
so
be a,
here's what I'll say though. He's been invisible, but be it's hard to be proactive when you have a lane that's just running it down,
yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
so I even though it's like Santorin hasn't been all that impactful on the game, it's like I don't blame him.
Yeah.
Like nobody should be when your top lane is dying this much. Also, I think there was like okay, maybe you can help me out with this. Um, Travis Gafford, when interviewing Solo, told him that he has the record for deaths or something. Um, he had 9 deaths in that game. Do you think the record was most deaths in a win, or do you think it was just most deaths?
I
I
feel like
feel
it
like there
has to
has
be
to have been a
most
game.
deaths in a win.
That's what I thought too, but that's not the way he worded it. So I was just curious if maybe you had a thought on that. But okay, you're thinking the way I'm thinking as well. I think it has to be most deaths in a win at 9. But I don't know. The way he worded it was just most deaths in a game. I can't really
Yeah, I don't
fact
know,
check
cause
that.
like I'm
If
trying to
someone
think
wants to
of
fact check
like
that, and if someone finds that out and knows and wants to put that in the comments, we will be looking at it. I'd be curious to know.
I'm trying to
Um,
think of like Worlds games where like somebody was really running it. The only like the
yeah.
prominent ones I can think of were like Whippo in Game One against IG in 2018 finals, and then Caps in Game Two. Like I remember, like I think pretty sure Whippo had like 8 or 10 deaths, and same with Caps. But I
Yeah,
don't know.
I don't have nearly good enough. I can't even remember what happened 2 days ago in the games, let alone what happened 2 years ago. So I don't know. But anyways, that was just a really interesting thought. Um, I did want to throw one more stat before we stop talking about Group D. I did want to throw one more little stat out there, and that was for Piosic. He is the highest kill participation at 89.2%. So that's really really good. And so I just wanted to give a little bit of praise for him on that. Anything else before we move on?
Nope.
Okay, what do you want to move on to next? We doing our awards?
Sure.
Awards time. Pop Off and Bean Soup awards are back. Let's start off with Pop Off. Who you got popping off this week?
I had Piosic. I didn't really want to pick a player from a 3-0 team because I think, you know, in the case of Damwon and Top Esports, I didn't think it was like one player was super standout. I just thought their whole team was playing really well. Whereas with
Fair.
DRX, like Piosic was hard carrying this team. He was their reason for getting their early lead against Top Esports and kept them in the game for a long time. He was absolutely smurfing on his Nidalee. He had a really good Kindred game, and I think he's looking really good. For being a rookie on the world stage, he's looking really damn good.
Yeah, it's so warranted. I want to see more of that guy's in Italy. It's really fun to watch. It's really good. It's really oppressive, and we need more of it. Me, I went with Nuggery. Big surprise, right? I talked about how I love his Kennen, and his Kennen was insane. So he was my pop off award right there. His flanks were insane. He was great in lane despite being hard camped with a Nautilus living on top of his face. So good for him. I really want to see more of his Kennen. Let's go Bean Soup now. Who's disappointing you this week?
I had double lift. It was, I think, I already talked about it before. I think double lift has been the worst performing member on TSM for this whole year, and obviously had a really terrible spring split with Team Liquid. He's been on the decline. I think we're seeing the descent of double lift. Just,
Oh, don't say it.
I
I'm
said
thinking
it.
the same thing, but
I've
I
been saying
know.
it. I think we're really starting to see like double lift's decline. I was not impressed by his Senna whatsoever. I know people were kind of like giving points to double lift because he picked up a couple wins on Senna in like the NA playoffs. Yeah, while that's good to get your first career wins on that broken OP champion, go right ahead. You can do that. But his Senna, in comparison to the other Sennas that we've seen in the group stage so far, have been just completely night and day. Like you look at Jackie Love Senna, I think Kramer had a really insane Senna game. Reckless's Senna game against LGD as well. And then I don't know. Somebody needs to explain to me how Ezreal Bard are getting solo killed by um, Nautilus and what was the other? I don't know the other AD, but I don't know how like they're dying 2v2 and have no
It was
lane pressure.
carelessness,
Yeah,
honestly. It was just carelessness. He's walking up. He's not respecting the level two, which, by the way, for those that don't know, respecting level two is like, that is something that happens every game. Like, if you can't do that, that's something that's really disappointing to see on the world stage. You should know if you're going to hit level two first. You watch any pro game, you'll see the team that has the shove will start to pressure the other bot lane off the wave, and they'll have to wait for the wave to slowly push into them. This is nothing new. And so it was just really careless out of double lift to get picked off there. He had to blow his flash. He came back to lane, got hooked again, and just died. And then it felt like bot lane was just over. So yeah, that's all it is. It's carelessness.
who'd you have?
I went with solo. Okay, here's the thing, man. It's so sad, but like you could go with like almost anyone on TSM or anyone except PoE
PoE.
on
Yep.
FlyQuest for
On
Bean
actually,
Soup.
I don't know. I don't know. I think Ignar and Turtle played all right for FlyQuest,
Okay, that's true. I guess maybe you're just thinking like you could
and
just go with
I
the
wouldn't give
NA
it to
region as a whole. Maybe you
a
could just
Broken Blade on TSM either.
yeah. Okay, maybe that, you know what? Let's just be honest then. That's just not a fair statement, but it's just the way NA is looking right now. It just feels like you could give it to the region even with no expectations coming in. Enough going out on that tangent though. Let's talk about solo because his Renekton was really really bad. His Volibear was really really bad. And for me the one that got me was the first game. where he just tried to flash the Camille elastic, whatever the hell that thing's called, his E or her E, pardon me. There's no world where you ever need to fight that. And again, maybe it's nerves, but regardless, it's something you can't do. And it was just really, really disappointing to see. I don't have much else to say. I just think that Solo is very obviously right now the player that's holding FlyQuest back from playing at the level that we can expect of them. Again, I'll mention no, I don't expect the FlyQuest level to be anything special in that group, but you need to be a little bit better than what they're showing. And I think it's definitely Solo that's holding them back right now. I do think he's better than what we're seeing. I do think he can turn it around, but he's got to do it really freaking fast because you only got 3 games left. And week 2 of group starts in like 2 days. Like there is no time to sit back, get in scrims and stuff like that. There's no time. There's no time. You got to pick it up fast.
Yeah,
And
it's not
so,
really much of like a week one, week two anymore. It's kind of like,
dude, Worlds is flying by. It's crazy.
yeah.
Yeah, it's really insane. But anyways, Bean Soup Solo, nothing more. I don't need to harp on him anymore. He looked really bad.
Okay, we're gonna move on just to a little bit more meta discussion at Worlds. We did one right after the play-in tournament happened, just to kind of recap like new picks or like potential picks that are performing a lot worse than expected. And I wanted to kick this little segment off talking about Syndra because I think Syndra was widely recognized as, one of the best mid laners before this tournament, and even in the play-in stage, it performed really, really well. Had like a 56% win rate. Very, early blind pickable champion kind of seen like with Syndra and Orianna as like the two champions you can pick early and often, and blind and be in a decent spot. But Syndra is having a really rough time at Worlds right now. That's a 28% win rate over 14 games. And like these aren't like bad teams that are picking Syndra and losing on Syndra. Like these are all good players that are playing Syndra and are taking losses. People like the notable good players that have played Syndra are Bjergsen, GA, PoE, Larson, Jensen, Angel. Like they all have a loss with Syndra. And for me personally, what I'm really liking that teams are kind of, they're getting this new style of playing aggressive mids or roaming mids into these control mages. We're seeing a ton of set mid, uh, Echo counter picks into the Syndra, Galio
Yeah.
picks into the Syndra, pretty much just focusing on either bullying the Syndra in lane and then taking your pressure elsewhere, or just picking a roaming champion and shoving your lane and roaming. I really like what teams are doing against the Syndra in terms of not worrying about the laning phase, you know, just mainly worrying about shoving the wave in and using your resources and pressure elsewhere on the map. Because Syndra is pretty much just a stat check champion, and more often than not, you're gonna lose to a Syndra in like a constant long, like 15-minute drawn out laning phase. Like if the Syndra player is good and is good at hitting their scatter of the weeks and their Qs in lane, you're probably gonna lose. But we're seeing a ton of good picks coming out from teams like I mentioned with the Echo, the Galio. We're seeing Lucian mid come up. It's a pretty good, aggressive pick. Obviously, we are mentioning earlier how Bjergsen kind of was dicking Nemesis a little bit with it. But overall, these are all good picks that people are playing into the Syndra. And just the other thing to note is the only times that Syndra has actually picked up wins are against control mages in Orianna and Azir. So we're pretty much seeing teams, if you get Syndra into a control mage, it's really good, but everything else, it is not so good.
Yeah, you mentioned the set mid. I'm done with set mid, man. I'm
I
not excited to watch set mid. I understand set's a good champion. I'm not saying that I don't think it should be played. I'm just saying it's kind of boring, don't you
I
think?
much
Like I
I
don't want to
much
see.
prefer the set mid over the set jungle. I think it does a lot better of
Okay.
a job.
Yeah, you hate set
I
jungle, eh?
hate
You
set
can't
jungle.
stand
I despise it. I think it does a much better job of like what the champion is able to accomplish being in a lane versus being in the jungle. And
Yeah.
I
I
just
mean, sure.
it's a good aggressive pick. Like we're constantly seeing players that are playing set mid that are like winning lane. They're up CS, they're pushing the wave, they're affecting the rest of the map, they're making good utilizations with their ult and their E's, and I like it. Better than
I have no
fucking set
preference
dog shit
on.
jungle.
Yeah, I don't have any preference on set whether he's in jungle or mid or top or support. I think the biggest issue is that he can be played in all of those roles right now, and I think that that's something that's just kind of whack. Like if you have a champion that is just so strong in 4 different roles, maybe he needs a little bit of a tuning. But I mean, that is what it is. For me, where I want to talk about is a level 1 invades. I talked about this a little bit on last episode, but it means so much more now. Now that we're seeing what can happen to a Twitch if you don't have a strong level 1, and the level 1 invade out of SOFM and Suning really fucked up the Twitch Recon. And so I wonder if we're going to continue to see that duo. Um, you know what else? So I'm not saying I expect this, but this could happen. Is we might see a lane swap if teams truly do believe that the Rakan and Twitch are that strong, and teams are going to pick like the Draven Leona into it. You might just say, you know what, we'll give Draven a plate bot, but we'll send their Twitch top to be able to have a free laning phase and to farm up a little bit. I won't be surprised if I see that happen. But I think that we're going to see a little bit less Twitch just because of how important the level ones are. If with a Draven running at you, you're going to get destroyed. And level ones just means so much. The stronger level one team is going to invade. That's just the meta that we've seen, which is, by the way, has been a lot of fun to watch. Do I like games being decided so early? Not exactly, but I do like seeing a lot of fighting, and I hope to see a little bit more of that. So that's something that's pretty cool with the level one invades. And I wonder if we're going to see some new AD carries. We did see the Callista come out right after. We might see some AD carries or just some earlier picks that are just stronger level ones or stronger in laning phase.
Yeah, I think the Twitch, it got off to a really hot start with, I think Tactical picked up like two early wins on the Twitch, and everyone was kind of, everyone just like had this opinion that like, oh, Twitch is finally back. But like going into the group stage, like, or even into the back half of playing stage, we saw just players being really easily to counter this Twitch. Depending on the support combination, specifically with Rakan, we're seeing a ton of Leona into Rakan. We mentioned before how like Leona's always been a good pick into Rakan, and I feel like Twitch, yes, while it is good, you also do have to like meet certain draft conditions for this champion to be successful. You can't just pick it and expect to be good. You got to fit certain draft conditions. You can't just pick Twitch Recon and be like, okay, we'll play it into whatever they have. Like, if they're gonna do what Suning did to them with the Leona Draven, you're gonna have a rough time.
Yeah, it's a really good point. It's yeah, you can't just pick it freely. Kind of like how we were talking earlier about Bjergsen and Zillion. It's sort of the same thing. You need to make sure that you're getting the right matchups. Anything else that's intrigued you for as far as the world's meta so far, or
Not
anything that you think might change?
not really intrigued me, but Renekton is kind of a terrible champion, and we've been saying for a long time that it's a pretty terrible champion.
Yeah, for
Even
those
and
that are new listeners, we harp on Renekton top all the time. It's not even that I think it's bad. It's Renekton blind that we're really always harping
yeah,
on. We don't like that pick blind at all. It's like you need to win lane really hard. I don't want to repeat too much what we always say, but basically we don't like it blind. It's exploitable,
yeah,
and if
like
you're not winning the game.
I'm trying to like rack my brain around like why teams are constantly like sticking with this Renekton. And my only thought is that like if you're a team like a Top Esports or you're a team like a DRX or you're a team like a Gen G and you have like this strong belief that oh yes, we are a good team, we know how to play the game, we're gonna smash these kids, then I can understand like why you're picking Renekton because it is an early game, a very early to mid focus champion. It is on a clock in terms of its effectiveness over the course of the game, and I can understand the logic of if you're in the belief of they might be playing a weaker team, or we just think we're that good and we're able to pick this champion and win early with it and get a big enough lead to where the Renekton fall off doesn't matter as much. I can understand that, but what I can't understand is yes, teams blind picking their Renekton, thinking that it's a good champion in a vacuum against any other champion, or that they're going to pair Renekton with a ton of like late game scaling champions like a Senna, like an Orianna, like some non early aggressive junglers. I think it's fine. The Renekton Nidalee combo seems to be working all right, but the problem with it is you have to execute on it, or you just look like a dumbass.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, if I'm gonna see someone blind pick the Renekton, make sure that it's 369 or Nuggery or someone like that. Like, no offense, Solo, but don't do that with Solo. FlyQuest, please stop that. Stop what you're doing. Stop it. Stop it right now, because it's just not gonna end well. Yeah. So I don't really have anything else to share as far as the meta goes. Do we have anything for quick news this week? Are
No,
we missing
well,
something?
nope, not really.
Oh, we wanted to talk about LS though.
Yeah, I didn't think that was quick news, but we have that, yeah.
Yeah, let's talk. Okay, let's talk about LS. There was a tweet for those that don't know. There was a tweet that went out basically saying that there is, and I'm paraphrasing here just to be clear.
It's on screen if you want to
Oh, we
read it
got it
out.
on the okay, okay, yeah. Let me just do that for our listeners actually. So LS tweets. The amount of things plaguing NA from the foundation up is alarming. Horror stories that exist behind the scenes, like players refusing to scrim academy because it'll make the academy players better and risk their job security, have to go. Lack of care about so much legit insanity.
Yeah, and then
End
so just
quote.
for the record that this tweet came out yesterday, and then there was a follow-up to it today that was also on Reddit. It was a clip of LS when they were doing the Face Check podcast that he does with Dom and Degon, pretty much saying that he was reaching out to an academy team or an LCS team to ask that team, how often they scrim their academy team, and in response, that org revealed to LS like this information that one of the players on their team refused to scrim the academy team because he didn't want to make the academy player better and potentially lose his job. And to me, like for a player to one say that, and then also two for that team to keep that player on that team is just insanity. Like the the disconnect between like the esports culture and the traditional sports culture is just so different. It's crazy. Like it's
Yeah.
the norm in traditional sports. Like you have a ton of players on a team. Like it's pretty different in League of Legends. Like you have 5 players on a League of Legends team, and that's your starting roster, and then you maybe have one or two substitutes that actually get quality time. Whereas in like traditional sports, if you're on a basketball team, yes, there's 5 starting players, but you have usually, 7 to 9 bench players. If you're on a football team, there might be 22 players on the starting rosters on offensive defense, but the total roster is 53. Like there are constantly players that are going to be moving up and moving down the depth chart, and that it's known to like you want to help these players. It's good for team culture, and it's just crazy to me to see like this esports culture where players on their own teams will refuse to scrim each other to make the team better. That's just so
Yeah.
crazy to me, and I can't understand it at all.
It is very selfish, right? And look, the thing is, you're dealing with kids here. Like, there's a lot of people that are just young players, and I don't blame them for thinking that way because it is a very immature way to look at it. But you're afraid of losing your job, right? Like, what 19-year-old isn't going to think that way? And I think that's on the coaching staff to really paint them the picture of how important it is to be able to give feedback off each other. If you can have players play against one another against their academy team, maybe the quality of practice isn't as good, but you get that instant feedback from the players that you're playing with. Like if you're, let's say, FlyQuest and you have a scrim with TSM, do you think Doublelift is going to tell Wild Turtle all the things they're doing wrong before going into playoffs? No, they're not going to do that. That's where you need to be playing against your academy team so that you could actually have that feedback of, look, here's how I'm exploiting you in lane, and that could go both ways, and it's just better for the overall team.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
you also need to like you need to know as an organization and as a team the level of strength of your academy between LCS. I mean, like the proof is in the
yeah,
pudding. We saw this year. There were like I don't have like I don't know if this is a fact, but I would assume that like this was the most substitutions and player substitutions and like roster shakeups that we've ever had in like
yeah.
over the course of a split. We saw Immortals get their whole roster flipped upside down before the season started, and then subsequently 3 weeks later, we saw Dignitas making constant roster moves. We saw like 100 Thieves have they were rocking different rosters. TSM made a support substitution. I'm trying to think of other teams. I don't know. There was just tons of roster swaps, and academy players. They're like the future of the league. Like we can't just keep importing strong players into NA. Like the data would suggest that importing players is bad, and imports do not perform well. We look at like Korean imports. Like there's been very few Korean imports that have actually been successful. The only ones that I can think of really off
Mhm.
the top of my head are like Impact and Core JJ and I don't know who else.
Ignar,
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 yeah, I'd put
yeah.
Ignar. And in terms of
But there's been a
EU,
lot of flops too.
yeah, there's been a tons of flops, tons of like
Yeah,
flops from Korea. There are fucking like Piglet. I remember like
Oof.
KFO, that like hyped Chinese top laner that came in. Echo Fox also did like Looper, former world champion who played for like half a split, did nothing and then left. There's just so many
Bang.
more Bang. Yes, he's been pretty terrible in North America. There's been so many more failures than successes, and we're seeing in other regions how important it is to be fostering this young talent. And to just hear a situation that a player on an LCS team will refuse to scrim their academy team because one, they're worried about their job security. Like, if you're the starting mid laner, why shouldn't you just go shit on this guy? Like,
Yeah,
they obviously don't have the belief in themselves that they're better than this person if they refuse to scrim
right.
them. If I'm like a starting player on a traditional sports roster on a basketball on a football team, I like those guys take pride in like showing off in front of their teammates and proving that they're the best player on that team.
Yeah. Well, and if you're a pro player, you're there to compete. It's just more competition. That's what you do. That's what you
Yeah.
should thrive on is competition. So it's really shocking. But the thing that disappoints me the most about hearing this is who is running the team? Like, why are your players the ones that are making the decisions? Oh, you don't want to scrim the academy team? Tough shit. We're scrimming the academy team, you know?
Yeah.
Like, who's running show here? Who is the coach that is allowing this to happen? And if they are, if there's like management that's allowing this to happen, see ya. Goodbye. Like, you should be in charge. Your players should not be the ones in charge. And so even if the players don't want to scrim the academy team, that's tough shit. There are some areas where I think there's like, let's talk about TL for example. Their academy team was really bad. So I
Yeah.
could hear the argument of, look, it's not even worth scrimming them. We're not going to get that great of practice. If that's what it is, fine. But if it's you're afraid that you're going to get outplayed by your academy team, that's a big problem. The coaches should be let go if they're the ones that are allowing their players to just not play because they don't want to get their other players, their academy players, too good. That
Yeah.
makes no sense to me. That
Like,
is just weird.
like I wonder, like, I wonder which team this actually was on, because like
Yeah, me
it's kind
too.
of like an aha moment if it's like a Dignitas or an Immortals where the starting mid laner ended up getting subbed out for the academy players.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, it just be really interesting to learn. Like we hear from Cloud9 all the time that they scrim their academy team all the time, whether or not
Yeah,
it's
but they
like,
have a good academy team
yeah,
too.
well
That's the other thing. I
that's
mean, that's
true.
just to be fair. Yeah.
But you know, Cloud9 is one of the better teams in the region. Yes, their academy team is good, but if you're a bad team, like you're not going to be getting scrims versus the top teams. Like you need practice. You
Yep.
need good practice. And like you mentioned before, like when you're scrimming other teams, like they're not going to give you feedback on how you were playing like shit. But playing against
Right.
your own team, like there's so much more like that can be shared and reviewed and talked about when everybody's on the same page. And clearly, whatever org this is, they're not on the same page.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder like who has the power to do that, right? Like who has the ability to like overshadow what their coaches want? And to me, I look at TSM right away. But it's like, could I really see Doublelift being afraid to play against his academy team? Could I see Bjergsen being afraid to play against their academy team? Like, I don't see that happening from anyone on TSM. But if there's an organization that I feel like is way more player run, and that's not just how I feel. People hear that all the time. You hear that TSM is mostly run by their players. It makes you wonder if it's TSM. But again, you can't point any fingers because you really don't know, right? You
Yeah.
don't know.
I feel
But
like
anyway,
knowing the org would it might help put the pieces together because like I couldn't see in a world where like Bjergsen or Doublelift or Broken Blade are like refusing to scrim the academy team because they're worried about job security. Like
yeah.
I don't think on TSM the only person that should be worried about job security is Jungle on TSM.
Well, I mean,
Just
we speak
in
of
general.
him good, but
He's been good,
yeah,
but just in general.
yeah,
I'm telling you, when
yeah.
shit hits the fan, Spica might be one to go.
Man, yeah, TSM they don't got a lot of patience with junglers, nor should they. But that's neither here nor there. Anyways, anything else that we want to shout out or anything like that before we close out?
Nop.
So actually, one thing I do just want to let everyone know about is the schedule. Actually, let me pull this up. I have it somewhere. So there's no games tomorrow, and by tomorrow I mean on October 7th. There is no games in the morning. Uh, there are games October 8th at 4 a.m. EST, which is 1 a.m. PST.
Nice.
So there's not a long break. And the schedule just goes in order of groups. So on the 8th, we have Group A is playing the rest of their games. Friday, on the 9th, we got Group B playing the rest of their games, then C, then D on the 10th and 11th, respectively. So the schedule isn't all that difficult to keep up with. It starts on October 8th and it just goes A, B, C, D through the rest of the schedule until groups are done, and groups will finish on the 11th. After that, the knockout stage starts on October 15th, so only 4 days later. Um, when do we think we'll get another episode out? Do we think we'll do one on Sunday?
Hold on,
The
sorry. Let
games
me
end on Sunday. So the last day of groups is on Sunday.
like Sunday
I th-
morning.
yeah, Sunday at 4 a.m. EST is the first game, and the last game's at 9 a.m.
Either probably
EST.
Sunday or Monday it would have to be.
We're gonna try to get you guys the episode as soon as possible. Even today, we tried getting the episode out ASAP. It's just really hard to do. Like it takes a long time. For those that don't know, it takes quite a while to do prep. So we're trying to get you guys the episodes literally as fast as we can, and we will try to do that again next week as well. But if anything changes, we'll probably notify on Twitter if there's any changes. For now, we're gonna aim for Sunday night, and we'll go from there. So Sunday night's where we're aiming, but if that changes, you will be notified on Twitter. speaking of Twitter, go check us out on Twitter. follow at Toominator underscore. That's TOOMINATOR underscore. And at Bluejay, BLUEJAY underscore GG. Go follow us there. Episodes will be available on YouTube as always for those listening live. If you didn't catch the whole thing, VOD will be up very shortly. Maybe an hour from now if you're listening live and you didn't catch the whole thing, check YouTube in an hour. For those listening on YouTube or listening on Spotify, we thank you. Feel free to subscribe on YouTube and to comment and hit the bell and all that crap that people tell you to do. Anything else to shout out, JT, before we close out?
Nah.
Okay, perfect. Thanks again for listening, guys. We will see you guys next week. This has been episode 18 of the Clown Fiesta podcast.